All right, everyone. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining our webinar. I'm Evan Danis, Corporate Marketing Manager here at Lucas System. And thanks again for joining our webinar today, where we will be discussing how to drive sustainability and optimization in your warehouse with dynamic work execution systems. Leading our discussion today will be Kyle Franklin, Senior Solution Consultant here with Lucas Systems. Kyle has spent the better part of the last decade plus working in warehouse operations, helping to bring work execution solutions to customers around the globe, actually. So we're excited to have Kyle come on today and talk a little bit about optimization and sustainability in the warehouse. So we'll have an opportunity when Kyle's done here in a little bit to ask questions through the Q&A. So we hope you enjoy the presentation here, and I'm going to hand it over to Kyle and let him get started. Take it away, Kyle.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Again, as Evan introduced, my name is Kyle Franklin. I'm a senior solution consultant with Lucas, and excited to talk about this topic today and how we can drive sustainability along with optimization using dynamic software and using some sustainable principles when you cast that look on the DC. So for our learning objectives and things we're going to focus on today, kind of the highest level thesis is this idea that thinking sustainably or thinking from this green perspective isn't just about environmental benefits or altruism. It's also about finding and reducing waste in the standard, kind of supply chain lean methodologies. These things are not mutually exclusive, and like being sustainable is not necessarily comes at the expense of cost. And so we'll talk about all the ways to look at that and use that as a framework to evaluate your DC. We're going to explore how using like adaptable workflows that eliminate paper processes and manual touches can support sustainability goals. And then we're going to talk about how sustainability is embedded in the approach of the dynamic warehouse and dynamic software. Particularly examples what we're going to focus on is around cartonization and travel optimization within the DC. But all along the way, we'll talk about tangible customer examples and use cases. And so hopefully, as Evan alluded to in the QA, if you guys bring some examples of your own, we can have a discussion on how to apply these principles in different use cases. So to get into it, just to introduce this framework, and this idea that sustainable thinking and cost optimization are much more aligned than you would expect or think when looking at from the outside looking in. And it is just a lean framework that I want to kind of give you guys as you evaluate your operations and your DCs. So we look at things from a kind of three-tier perspective. So one, the kind of most obvious low-hanging fruit is looking at like waste in general, whether that's, and usually when we talk about material waste or energy waste or fuel, those kind of things, because they lower our operational spend, our OpEx, and then translate directly to cost savings. But from a sustainability standpoint, it's things we want to remove out of our system. So we'll talk about examples of all these, but less paper, less labels. How do we right size cartons and equipment to the actual work that has to be executed? How do we reduce returns and improve utilization? So we first cast our eyes on those material sources of waste, and then we look at what are human sources of waste. So we talk about travel, whether that's walking or driving around the distribution center. That's one lever that we can try to affect. We look at dwell time. So when a user is standing still or waiting for something, are they waiting for information? Are they waiting for product? Are they waiting for a decision? Are they waiting for like a supervisor or a leader? All of those things are potential sources of waste from a standard lean perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective as well. We look at congestion, we look at rework, and then we look at any time like a user is waiting for that supervisor to correct an error or an exception, or what happens when the happy path is broken, because those have downstream sustainability effects as well. Last, we look at how we can measure it. Important for a DC, but also important for any kind of green program or sustainability program for a corporation is, and we can borrow some of these metrics from the sustainable world. So we look at utilization and fill rates. So whether we're talking about fill rates from cartons or containers or trailers themselves, We look at that overall top line spend and what we're spending on materials. We look at first pass yield and reduce rework. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we measure our human capital, our resources, our teammates by, we can use surveys and things around satisfaction or effort. And then we can also look at turnover data to synthesize that as well. If all of these things are humming, a greener operation should lead to a lower cost per order and a more resilient DC from a environmentally sustainable standpoint, from a human sustainable standpoint, and from our communities. But we also need to compete in the marketplace, so this also helps with that. Getting into some tangible examples of applying these frameworks to our DCs. We'll talk through some examples at customers before we get into a specific customer case study. So we look at one kind of big effort in, when you look at sustainable engineering and those paths is, the circular economy, or the idea of the circular economy. And for that, we can borrow the idea of a closed loop system. So when we look at all of our touch points with our customers or our suppliers, are there any opportunities to create these closed loop systems? And do they make sense for our distribution center? So one example is around containers and totes. So I could pick, if I'm picking to customer orders, even to retail stores, I could pick and pack those into brown corrugate and ship those off to my customers either on parcel or loaded trucks. But can I look at an opportunity to instead use plastic totes that are reusable? And if I do have a closed loop system, can I find cost efficiencies there? Yes, there's a higher initial upfront investment from sourcing and buying all the totes, but there is some savings to being able to obviously reuse the totes over and over. And there's some operational savings from especially if I can license plate or numerate the totes versus having to apply stickers or labels. There's some standardization and compatibility there. And then, of course, I don't have to build boxes each time I start an order, and there's a lot of savings from either a human or a robotic machine capital to that process. But it might not make sense everywhere. One thing we can borrow from overseas in the typical grocery environment in the US and in North America, we typically pick all grocery orders, it's cases thrown onto a pallet. And that pallet might be disposable or eventually kind of circulates throughout the greater supply chain. But in the UK and a lot of the rest of the world, they're used to this traditional cage model where they're picking to shelves on cages, and then those cages sit at the grocery store and then are recirculated back to the DC. Using these cages allows you to pick smaller orders and segment things, and they're, again, more resilient, and they're less subject to damages than a standard pallet. So but it might not make sense everywhere. And if you don't have a closed loop system and things are going out to customers and you're not sure if you're going to get them back, there's issues there. But we still want to look at any opportunities there and see if there's cost savings. Another thing we look at, and honestly, we look at it every time we're in a DC for the first time or we're trying to design a process to align with the DC's current processes, we look at the question of, do I really need this piece of paper at this step? What information's on the paper, what's critical, what's superfluous, and what needs is it serving? Am I printing a big paper pick list at the beginning of the order because the user thinks they need that to process the order correctly? And then I ask myself, is that really necessary? Or are they really using this paper to kind of circumvent our RF or voice system or something else? Does a customer need that? Well, can it be printed on a label and attached to the box at the end instead of at this step? There's all these kind of evaluations we look at. One, not just to take out the paper, but to provide information to our teammates at the exact right time. So that's one source of looking for green waste, but finding efficiencies throughout the process. Next, we want to look at how fuel efficient are we? The idea of miles per gallon in the DC. I don't want to take my F-350 toy hauler big rig diesel down the street to the grocery store just to pick up a carton of milk, right? That job might be better suited for a bike or a scooter or a sedan, right? And likewise, we don't want to use our high value man up order picker equipment to pick items off the ground, for instance. Can I resize my equipment and my work queues or my assignments to better match what equipment allocation I have and to more optimally utilize that equipment? So one process we do a lot of places will be this concept of two-stage pick. So if I know that most of my order is picked from the ground or a ground accessible location, but I have a few oddballs or slow movers that are picked from the air or from a freezer or a segmented area, what I can do is take all of that, those ugly air picks, batch those all together into an assignment, and give those to one or two man-up drivers to pick for everyone across the floor, and then bring those down to a virtual pick location and let users pick those along the way. That way, we can most efficiently utilize that man-up because it's higher value labor, it's higher value equipment, and it's physically slower. Now, once I'm on the ground, I have all these double pallet jacks that I was using to unload trucks and load trucks at the beginning and end of the day. Well, can I put two different orders on that double pallet jack and pick it that way? So how do I maximize all of that equipment? So just like we think about our cars, we can do the same thing in a DC. The last one on this slide we'll talk about is this concept of first pass yield. And this is borrowed more from manufacturing than necessarily sustainability, but it's a similar concept of how do I eliminate scrap and waste in my process? And essentially, first pass yield asks us how often does an item, an order, pass through our entire happy path with no additional extra touches? And every time you fail that from a fail an audit or a return or an exception, a damage, anything like that, that fails the first pass yield. So, a really great Six Sigma organization is, well above 99% first pass yield. And we can use this as a metric to see how well we're doing from a waste perspective. But there is a significant carbon and labor impact to this because most commonly, the cost of doing a return to a DC is at least 3 times as expensive as shipping it to the customer in the first place. And then that 3 times metric is also applied to the carbon emissions and the other waste in the supply chain to do so. So anytime we can eliminate these extra touches of this rework, whether it's a wrong item going to a customer or a short or an overage, that's going to save multiple touches and multiple headaches out of the process. So when we can affect accuracy, we can affect both of these metrics, whether we're talking about cost and sustainability at the same time. Moving forward, I'll talk about a specific customer example with one of our customers out in the West Coast, Veritable Vegetable. They're based in San Francisco. And they have a challenge because they have a highly customized split case program and really overall a highly customized service to their customers. And they really drive home their message around customer service and sustainability and how that's part of their business. We deployed the Lucas solution with a lot of different nuts and bolts and nuggets to it. When we talk about smart pallet building, auditing, two-stage picking, and short runs. So they have a lot of functionality, but really tailored well to their process, and it really aligns with this mission. And Mary Jane really talks about how these two concepts are aligned here.
What makes us unique is that we are really driven by our values, and we adhere to our values every day.
We are a social enterprise. We're in business to try and affect a very fundamental change toward a sustainable food system.
For example, we really focus our effort on working with small and mid-sized growers. We want to keep them viable, and that's what our customers really know us for.
So our operation runs 2 warehouses. We have between 700 and 800 SKUs.
So our customers are primarily independent natural foods retail stores in and around California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Colorado, and Nevada.
The most important things to our customers are accuracy, customer service, quality, and timeliness.
From a customer service perspective, Lucas has been huge for us.
261. Pick 3 cases of bananas.
Every customer, whether you're a grocery store, a restaurant, or just us at home, getting what you ordered is really important. So Lucas has helped us improve our accuracy. That's improved by about 40%. which is a really big number because we're fairly accurate beforehand.
Each day I can come in and look at the Lucas Management Console and gauge how everything is going operationally in the warehouse. I can see what's being pulled right now. If I need to go check in with a puller about a specific, detail on an order.
It cuts down on steps. Order pickers spend half of their time walking. So anything that can cut down on steps cuts down on fatigue, cuts down on the time taken, takes better care of the person who's doing the work, and gets the work done more effectively and efficiently.
Then also the labeling that Lucas has done. We're now able to do more specific labeling if we have customers that are on a shared pallet, which helps our drivers split things out.
So now with Lucas, it exactly measures out your pallet to where as soon as you get your order, it tells you what pallet you need based on the check pallet, regular pallet, and it tells you exactly what height it's supposed to be. So you build your orders compared to that.
So at Veritable, when we think about sustainability, we think, what kind of impacts are these choices making on our community, on the environment, on our staff, for our customers? We have solar panels on our roof. We partner with our local food bank to take care of our food surpluses. We have hybrid trucks. We have electric trucks. Our refrigeration was done with a mind toward how we can use less refrigerant. Everything we do has to do with how we can do that practice in a sustainable way.
We consider ourselves a green company. We're always looking for what can we do to be more environmentally friendly. And Lucas, before Lucas, we went through a lot of paper.
The whole idea of picking the voice and giving away paper, that's great. The idea that it actually cuts down on reverse logistics, and therefore we don't have to run our trucks out of the way to pick up something we had misdelivered or make a new delivery for something we didn't deliver. It saves miles, it saves wear and tear on staff, and it saves the emissions of the truck and the burning of the fuel.
And then we're hands-free, so it lets us be safer in the warehouse because you're not juggling a clipboard and a pen and a paper and constantly, picking it up and putting it down and trying to juggle that as you are trying to also move boxes around.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that, guys. Yeah. So Veritable Vegetable, great customers to work with. I work closely with them on this project. And yeah, they really live a lot of what we're talking about here from looking at sustainability first, but how does that also translate to business resiliency as well and for the market? So next we'll talk about how we can use this concept of the dynamic warehouse and warehouse execution software to align with these sustainability goals as well. For Lucas Systems, our dynamic warehouse is a sustainable warehouse, and that consists of intelligent systems that optimize, adapt, and learn, and are easily changed to meet the flexible needs of a distribution center, because we know that those needs will change and evolve over time. So we don't want to constrain ourselves with necessarily hard automation if we can avoid it. And we can look at using these sustainability principles when we right size our systems and software to our operation as well. So how we affect a sustainability approach. So we'll first talk about travel and travel leading to lower waste, lower energy consumption, and less fatigue for people and equipment. So in this example, dynamic work optimization, we do it by optimizing pick paths throughout the DC. We also use it to create orders and assignments in the DC. So typically a user on a pallet jack, for instance, is picking one customer order at once, and that might lead to suboptimal filling of that equipment. So you either have an orphan pallet, which isn't full, or suboptimal grouping. If we break those up into assignments and instead group those more optimally on our double pallet jacks as seen here, we can more efficiently walk or drive through the DC, picking up more common SKUs, cutting down aisles and bays of travel, and utilizing essentially less equipment and being more sustainable. We do this by both optimizing the pick paths and that creation of the orders and assignments for the users. This also allows us to optimize assignments as they come in. So if you're in an environment where a customer store gets to order multiple times a day, or a department in a hospital, for instance, and it gets released to the floor at different times, and for a lot of DCs, those all get separated out into individual tasks or pallets or containers. we can hold and continue to build assignments and optimize those as we grow them. And then at time of starting work, we can use the latest and greatest information to batch those orders together, cutting down on waste from travel, cutting down on labels, cutting down on pallets, cartons, all of that. We also have less walking for the human workers and overall less energy usage in the system. At the end of the process, then we can go through and then reconsolidate those parts of the orders together so they can make it out in one piece instead of having it be unorganized all over a floor. So a lot of opportunities to help there. Another kind of module within dynamic work optimization we look at is on cartonization and how we can power this concept of pick in a box. So we talked earlier about if I do have a closed loop system with my customers, I can use picking totes. But if I'm shipping to e-commerce customers or one-offs, I don't have that ability anymore. And so I do have to use final shipping cartons out the door, and I can look at how can I optimize picking that carton and filling that carton for the optimal shipping throughout the system. So instead of using and picking to a tote, we can pick directly to the shipping carton on a piece of equipment like a cart or a pallet jack. We can only do that if we have really good cartonization data and algorithms in order to fill that carton appropriately. If I guess too widely, then I'm going to end up with a lot of air in the cartons and either too many or too few cartons that need a lot of overages at pack. So we partner with a company called Perseus on an opportunity that use advanced cartonization, which they connect to the carrier APIs like UPS and FedEx, and they're able to actually do rate shopping not only for an individual, for an entire order, but they can look at the configs of whether an order is easier to ship in 2 separate boxes versus one large box, for instance. Using those shipping carrier costs as proxy for their carbon footprint or impact, we can reduce our carbon impact by more optimally filling these cartons. We end up using less overall cartons, we ship much less air, we maximize that trailer fill, we increase packing speed because the picker is picking and packing in line. So there's one less step for them to do. And then we get immediate savings right away because we can split those carrier costs that we are saving right away. A lot of opportunity there. And another module is around dynamic slotting. So dynamic slotting uses a dynamic 3D map of the DC along with this concept of swaps to more optimally place items throughout the DC.
Lucas Systems has transformed slotting with the introduction of intelligent swaps. With just one click, our AI-based dynamic slotting tool generates the best slotting recommendations in real time. These recommendations can be made at will and allow you to reslot as frequently as possible. The more you reslot, the quicker you will see your ROI. The future of slotting is here, driving dramatic improvements in your warehouse operations.
So the impact of this is that one sustainable principle is the idea of instead of going out and buying more, it's what can I do more with what I have now? And so if we can improve this warehouse storage utilization, then that means we don't need to necessarily expand the DC or open a new DC greenfield somewhere else. We can more optimally leverage what we currently have. It'll essentially move fast movers closer to pick paths and drive fewer replenishments, which can then drive better labor efficiency, as well as reduction of damages and mispicks by placing items, heavy items earlier in the pick path, or placing items that look close to each other, not next to each other when we look at our slotting recommendations. So overall, this drives more sustainability in the warehouse, again, doing more with less. One other customer example I want to bring up is Pool Bay Holdings. They're an e-commerce firm, mainly in the safety, industrial, commercial space, based out of Southern England in Poole. They reached out to us because they also wanted to pull paper out of their very manual process. And through that, we were able to help them in a lot of ways. So we took the paper out for the paper order sheets and translated that to voice-directed instructions. We also use optimal pick paths and dynamic work optimization to group orders onto a cart. We do this concept of two-stage picking. So they have an area of awkwardly shaped signs and other large equipment. Instead of sending every picker to that area to get these awkward items, we build a special signs cart, and those users will go and pick all the signs for everyone on a route or a cutoff time, pull those forward to a virtual location, and let other users pick from that. So we get the accuracy of that merge, but then we don't waste the time on the awkward equipment, and we don't waste users switching around from path to path or floor to floor. So they saw a huge increase in accuracy, kind of coming away from the paper, and nearly 1,000 trees saved from all of that coming out of the process, along with a huge, 35% gain in productivity as well. So to summarize and wrap it up and give you guys some tangible examples you can walk away with, when we look at these different areas of the warehouse, we can look at how to tie that sustainability impact directly to DC cost impact. And this gives you the tools in your toolkit to, argue up or sell up throughout the organization to say, hey, I might want to take paper out of the process for an altruistic or a green initiative, but I also am going to get, if I do it right, get some DC cost impacts as well. So I'm going to have less users waiting around for paper or waiting around for labels. I'm going to have to switch out paper and labels less. I'm going to have to maintain less equipment. And then I get an accuracy benefit because we know that users sometimes read labels in order to circumvent the system. So we getting them the right information at the right time will have a lot more training and ancillary benefit as well. We look at accuracy. We know that we want to improve accuracy from a customer satisfaction standpoint. We want fewer trips and reshipments back to the DC. But we know that every time we touch a return, it's going to cost 3 times as much as if we shipped it. And a lot of firms are being quote unquote smart about, oh, we don't want the return anyway. The product value isn't worth it, but that's more waste in our system. So how can we work upstream to reduce it rather than downstream selling it through or essentially throwing our products away that we're selling? We look at cartonization to reduce the overall shipping costs, and that directly translates to packaging and emission loss, because that's essentially how our carriers work, along with some commercial agreements as well. And then any kind of travel optimization or intelligent batching we can do will lower that equipment and human energy use. We can have need fewer equipments, fewer pallet jacks, fewer forklifts throughout the warehouse, but then we get a higher throughput. We're able to lower our cost per unit and drive DC benefits that way. So lots of examples here. Be happy to talk about more. But yeah, any questions from the group? Evan, anything in our QA there? Yeah.
So let's see, kind of with great information. Thank you very much. Some great info on how to become optimized and sustainable in the warehouse. Some great examples of some of our customers doing that. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can ask those in the Q&A. To get us started, I'll throw out a couple questions here, Kyle. We talked about obviously the work execution system. How does that generally integrate with existing WMS, ERP, other automation equipment? Does it easily integrate or does it replace? How does that work generally?
Yeah, for most, we plug right into a WMS or ERP system. So for most customers, we just plug right in. It's a pretty easy integration. Essentially, we didn't need a web or API dump of orders out for the areas we're working on, and then we API back our confirmations on those individual tasks. So we're not necessarily tightly integrating and touching every table in a WMS or ERP. We keep it really light touch, and we've worked with all the tier ones from Manhattan SAP to a lot of homegrown and legacy systems that have been around, green screens, AS400. So we kind of pride ourselves on being able to tailor to any ERP or any host system. So it's usually easy to bolt right on and fill in those gaps for that host system.
Okay, great. Looking for some other questions. If you have any, please, like I said, add them to the Q&A. Another question that I wanted to kind of throw out there is, you talked about AI-driven reslotting and adaptability maybe to seasonal shifts, or how frequently does it reoptimize? Is it autonomous, or does it need some manual approval with our reslotting?
Yeah, it's tuned towards the idea of that, approval of it's essentially set up as a way to say, I'm a supervisor or inventory manager, and I have, an extra hour at the end of my Friday, and I have with the Lyft driver. What are the best possible moves he can make at this time in order to optimize our warehouse? So it's opportunistic, it's on demand. Instead of the system assuming we're making these moves and moving around, because we know that we want to be opportunistic as we get a chance to reslot the warehouse around all of our outbound operations. We say to our managers and our leaders, we make it super easy to take whatever time you do have, and we can constantly optimize and fine tune along the way. If you do know you have big seasonal shifts or sales coming, it's kind of a pride to use the tool more. But in general, as a maintenance thing, it's easy to just drop in, grab the next best 3-4 moves, and help your DC out.
Okay, great. Thanks for kind of explaining that in a little more detail there. Another question we talked about, taking paper out in a couple of examples you used, which is great from a sustainability standpoint. How does the workforce generally respond to that sort of thing? What's a training curve look like from going to paper pick for a lot of folks to a voice-directed, maybe AI-driven system?
Yeah, it's usually a pretty easy transition, but I can't say that every single user reaches it the exact same way, because people do they get used to the way they work on things, and there's a lot of times some stuff on that paper or on that sheet that they are trying to use to make decisions. So our approach to that process is, instead of waiting until UAT or go live to introduce this to people, really in that early design step, I want to walk around with that user and I want to know, what are they using that paper for? What decision points are they making there? And where can I systematize that? Because I want that expert user's knowledge and that know-how, and I want their exception management, because they're running into the problems every day that they see, versus an IT guy who designed a flow chart or SOP, 3 years ago that hasn't been refreshed. So I really want to be, and Lucas as a company really tries to be close to those users to get their input, to say, if this paper were gone, what are the pieces of information you need, and when do you need it, and what burden or heavy lifting are you doing to try to plan your work out? Because we can help with that, and we can democratize that tribal knowledge, for lack of a better term, to our newer users and our new associates in order to help speed them up. So I find, and we found in general as a company, the earlier you bring people in the process, the much more likely they are to go with that and go with you going forward, versus having software dropped in your lap. Whether you're a blue collar worker, white collar worker, or you're sitting at home on your favorite app, when they move the button and you don't get asked, it can be frustrating. And so why force that approach on to our teammates, our hourly associates who are really driving the business?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's great advice in sort of any system, or bringing on any new process or system in any sort of work environment. I think it's always important to bring folks in early on in the process so they buy in. Let's see. We do have a question in about right sizing packages. How does this affect sustainability for UPS and FedEx if we're sending many different size packages?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, what we learned, and really, and working with Tomas at Perseus, is learned that, like, UPS, the way, and FedEx, the way they charge, depending on the size of the item, the shipping carton size, where it's going, zip code, the ship method, all of those can have a lot of complex factors in what the actual pricing model is. So saying a standard model of, this is always going to go in the biggest box that can fit all of the items, isn't necessarily the most cost efficient for UPS and FedEx. Typically, they don't necessarily care about the amount of different sizes they get, as long as those sizes are accurate, and they scale and reweigh them there. You're more dealing with the size cost on your internal side, as far as like, how many different box sizes should I have from management purposes, how many different slots do I need to, or how many different pallets of boxes do I need to have on my pallet area. So you don't want to go too crazy, and you don't want to go necessarily box on demand, essentially, unless your product mix requires that. So people have like pack size machines for those long and awkward items. So those make sense for carton fill. But when I'm looking at just my standard work, There is probably a management cost to having so many different box sizes, but if we can use those different combinations, we can more optimize the shipping method. And then if you have a system like ours that says, I have a cart, it has a shelf that has 40 inches of space. I don't necessarily always put 4 boxes on that shelf. I can put 2 larges and a small, or 3 mediums. I can actually optimally fill that carton. If you can do a good job at that, then you can be efficient throughout the whole process.
Excellent. Thanks for that question, and thanks for that great answer, Kyle, as well. I will put one last call out for any questions, and then just issue a reminder that we will be sharing the recording and the slides here in a couple of days afterwards. It's some follow-up, so there could be some folks who wanted a little bit more information or weren't able to join us today, but we will make sure that we share the information here. So seeing no further questions, I want to thank Kyle for, again, a great presentation and some great just tidbits and sharing of some customer examples of how well folks are able to optimize and be sustainable all at the same time. So they're not mutually exclusive. I do, as Kyle has shared here, please download our dynamic warehouse white paper that will give you a little bit more even information on some of these features and solutions as well. And again, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, and have a great 4th of July holiday.
Yeah. Have a good one, guys.